Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and we are going to be doing some of the finishing, at least what I can film, for our Trident cluster model. So everything's glued together, everything's assembled, I've test fit everything, everything fits in nicely. What I want to show you today is some finishing techniques that will take what we have right now and end up making it look like a much nicer looking product. The first thing, and the thing that takes forever, frankly, is dealing with the wood fins. Now, we're not working with balsa, remember, this time we're working with basswood. And the nice thing about basswood is that the grain in the wood isn't as pronounced. Balsa, if you were to just paint the balsa fins, and maybe you tried this, and you don't prep it in any way, shape, or form, there are very, very deep grooves that develop in the wood, and they're very noticeable. Basswood doesn't have that problem, fortunately. So the amount of prep work that I need to do isn't anywhere near as much as balsa, but I'm going to show you what I would do with a balsa kit either way, because I'm kind of in the habit of doing this one way or the other. I use a combination of a couple steps. One is I use a wood filler. I like this brand. It's pretty nice. Comes in a variety of colors, but I just want a white. Um, when this was new, it was a little bit more. It wasn't a liquid, but it was not as dried. Um, but even so, it wasn't quite something that I could just paint like right onto the wood. So what I've done here is I've taken a bit of the wood filler, put it into a nice little, paper bathroom cup, and I've added just the tiniest bit of water to it and kind of mixed it up. And now it's a bit of a slurry. It's pretty viscous. It's not, it's on the order of thickness, of viscosity of paint. Um, but it is still quite liquid. In fact, I probably put a little bit too much water in it. It's kind of hard to work with. I take, geez, I don't know, for this amount of wood, I probably need maybe like a half a teaspoon of the wood fill, and seriously, just the tiniest bit of water to make it back into the liquid. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to paint it on. Before I do that, though, I'm going to show you some of the other things. After I'm done that, I have a very liquid wood seal here, sanding sealer. I put that on the top. Honestly, I don't really know how much that accomplishes. This stuff that I'm using right here, this fills in the gaps a lot better. And by the way, there are a lot of other versions of wood fill that you can get out there. You could get just like spackle essentially from a hardware store, and that does a decent job. I like this a little bit better um, for a variety of reasons, but we don't need to get into it. Anyway, so wood fill and then sanding sealer, I use that too. And then I'm going to prime it with actual priming spray paint. And in between each of those steps, I'm going to make sure everything's dry, and I'm going to sand it down with sandpaper in between each step. For this basswood, I'm only going to do one step of each, but if I were dealing with balsa, especially if it were really, really grainy, I'd probably do two steps, at least two of the wood fill, probably just one of the sanding sealer, but maybe more than one coat of the primer as well. And then the final paint coat, which might take a couple coats as well. So, the thing about building rockets, and if you want them to look really nice, is you can build it. Like this one took me, what, 3 videos? So 15 minutes pop, so maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. But the finishing is going to take a week, easy. So it is what it is. Anyway, so I'm not going to show you all this, but I'm going to get this nice and spread out. I've used the plastic spoon over here to mix it up as best I can. And then I'm just going to paint it on. This is actually, like I said, a little runnier than I normally do. I usually have it a bit thicker. And by the time I'm done, this is slightly dried out a bit as I go through, the viscosity is going to drop. And right now I am brushing this one with the grain. The second coat, if I were to do it, I would brush against. I'm probably just gonna, I have a lot actually for the job I need to do. So I will probably end up just putting two coats of this on, one direction and one the other, just to kind of fill in the grain as much as I can. Generally, you're probably best to try to paint. Actually, I don't really know. I just do both just to be sure. Notice too that I've kind of spread this onto the tube, which is not purposeful, but it happens. If you want to get a really, really nice finish. Like these tubes are actually quite good, the brown ones, craft tubes. But you can paint them entirely as well. This one, the white part, you can see the spiral where the tube was, or how the tube was constructed. Sometimes you can get a really deep spiral in the tube. If they're not as nice tubes, you might want to paint that and fill them in as well. This stuff does a pretty decent job of getting into the crack in the spiral and filling that in. And naturally, you'd have to stand that down as well. So there isn't really a whole lot of wood here to paint. I think I'm going to make a mess just kind of in the process of applying the filler here. So I'm just going to paint over this part of the tube anyway. And I'll probably sand that down. So this goes pretty quickly. And I'm dripping all over the place. I'm going to mop that up. Like I said, this is a little runnier than I would have liked. But overall, it goes quickly. The other sealer, you paint that on as well. I usually put a little bit on a little piece of cardboard scrap and brush that out. It goes down pretty quickly. I'm not going to, of course, I'm going to fill all this. I'm just not going to fill it right now on camera because you don't really need to see that. It's not super interesting. The other thing that I will point out, though, is the final paint work. And I'm not going to be filming that right now. So this part, with the exception of the brown part that's sticking out, is supposed to be all black. And this part is supposed to be orange. So that's a pretty easy way to paint. I mean, you don't have to mask anything off for the most part. The exception here, so the nose cone, I'm probably going to paint on top of the black plastic just because my paint might not quite be the same. Oh, and by the way, this little, where this was made, this needs to be sanded down because there is some plastic scrap left over. I'll probably use X-Acto knife to kind of shave that off and then sand it down. It's kind of an odd nose cone. I'm not super in love with it. It's textured strangely. But anyway, this part, I'll put that up out of the way for a minute. I definitely can't paint this because this needs to be smooth and it needs to be the size it is. If I paint it, it's going to add just a little bit of layer to it and it won't fit into this part as nicely. So I need to mask this off, and stuff I use is painter's tape. This comes in a variety of different kinds. This stuff that I have right here is called Ultra Sharp, and it is like a thin plastic as opposed to normal tape. Like I can't tear this with my hands. It's plasticky. So I need to cut it off. Hopefully, I've eyeballed this. Hopefully I've cut off enough, but if I didn't, that's okay. And I'm just gonna line this up nicely and mask off the section of the tube, or the junction there, since I don't want to get that painted. That is the general way that you go about using masking tape. Now, regular masking tape, the kind of manila colored stuff, I don't like because you have to get really good stuff to avoid bleed through, and it still doesn't make very sharp lines. This stuff is called ultra sharp line for a reason, because like it's plastic, and if you push it down pretty well, you're not going to get any paint leaking around the sides in general. Sometimes you do. It's kind of unavoidable sometimes, at least in my experience. So this is going to go off to my paint shop. It's going to get primed, and then it's going to get painted black. Same deal with this, except I've got the woodwork to do. Oh, and so the thread here, usually I don't apply the shock cords until after I've painted them, so I don't have to worry about them. But since this one is built into the motor mount, I don't have a lot of choice there. So this is going to get stuffed in here. And then you need to protect that so it doesn't fall out. What I'm probably going to do is get a piece of a paper towel or something and jam it in there. Newsprint works pretty well too. Paper towel is a good choice in general, just to keep it out of the way. Try not to paint the paper towel would be my suggestion. So I'm actually going to push the paper towel pretty far in there to keep the shock cord well inside. And this hole, I haven't really decided what I want to do about that either. I'm probably just going to kind of deal with the fact that it's there, but it's another reason why I want to push whatever material I'm stuffing in there to protect the shock cord way down so I don't inadvertently paint the shock cord through this hole. So in any event, at this point, I need to finish painting out with my wood seal, and there's a lot of off-camera stuff that's going to get done over several days that's not worth watching. But in any event, the final stage, everything should be basically done. We'll do last bits assembly. There are a couple of decals, and then I will show you how to prep it for flight. So thanks for watching.